All right, now our playback here is based on wherever this grain is and how big the grain is. We can move the grain around so we play different parts of the sample. We'll look at that next. But first, let's just talk about how we can shape the size of the grain or change the shape of the grain. If you think of the grain as a loop, then thinking about the shape, a good way to think about it would be in terms of the volume of the loop. All right, does it start at full volume? Does it end at full volume? In this case, our grains, if we move all the way over here, this area here in this little graphic, this is showing us the current shape of each grain. So each one doesn't start at full volume and end at full volume. They kind of fade in and fade out. And that's why we have this nice crossfading and we don't hear any pops. Because our grains are starting by fading in and then fading out. All right, it's quite nice. Now, for some reason, we want to change the shape of the grain. Maybe we want the grain to be a bit more percussive and have a bit more of an attack at the beginning, which could be useful for various reasons. We can change the shape of the grain by either using one of these 4 predefined shapes or using the parameters down here. Now, if for some reason you don't see all these parameters, you might need to make sure that you're using the most current version of the granulator, which you can update pretty easily just by following the instructions I gave you before. But right now, let's experiment with the grain shape. Make this a bit smaller. If I change this from standard, we can have fall, and I see the shape there. It's kind of like a downward sawtooth. So the beginning of the grain is going to have a stronger attack, right? Because the volume is louder. If we change this to rise, you see this is the opposite. So it starts at a low volume and fades up, which is pretty nice. And then we have noise, which is interesting because it essentially, I don't know if this is white noise, but it kind of sounds like it is. And it uses that to affect or modulate the grain shape. If one of these predefined shapes doesn't do exactly what you like, you can start with one of these and then adjust these parameters. So its shape here, by adjusting this, you can see essentially I've kind of gotten rid of the initial volume fade in and fade out. That crossfade is kind of gone, and now we have a smaller grain that's also going to leave a little bit of a gap in between the other grains that play. With tilt, all right, this gives us a chance to kind of skew it to the left or right. And then with spike, we can make this little rounded hill a bit more spiked and concentrate it towards the center. And if I was to utilize spread again for the grain like we did before, now we can really hear the difference in the speed of the grains on the left and right side because they're being detuned, right? So before we even touch anything else in this instrument, just understanding what a grain is and how much control you have over manipulating the shape of the grain gives you a lot of sonic possibilities. But again, our grain has been stuck in the middle of this file. What if we want to move the grain around? Thankfully, that's very easy to do if we just manipulate the file position. Let's talk about that next.